Hello, and welcome to today's edition of Global Trade Talk. I'm Anna Rushing with Integration Point and your host for today's session. Today, our topic is QPWP, Frequently Asked Questions. And to help us answer these questions, we'll be talking with Liz Connell, who is our Vice President of Product Management at Integration Point. Liz has a lot of experience working with QPWP, QXWX, and ACE, all topics she's going to cover with us today. Hello, Liz.
Hi, Anna, and thank you for having me.
We are so excited to hear from you about QPWP. I know that it's been in the news a lot lately, especially QPWP, QXWX, and we want to know, and I want to know more about it as well. First, let's start off kind of easy, and can you tell me exactly what is QPWP and what does it stand for?
Well, actually, Anna, it really doesn't stand for anything. I once heard somebody tell me that it stood for quick processing without paper, but that isn't really exactly true since there's still paper involved in the process. QPWP is actually the electronic filing of a CF-7512 form, or an in-bond document. Companies can use QPWP to move goods in-bond from one location to another. Many people that we work with use the QPWP functionality to move their goods in-bond from a port of arrival to a foreign trade zone, or they use it to export their product out of the United States in-bond so they don't have to pay U.S. customs duties and tariffs on their FTZ merchandise.
Okay, so then do I need to be an FTZ to use QPWP?
No, not at all. Companies that move their goods in-bond for one reason or another from a port of arrival to another port to make entry could also use the QPWP functionality to bond their merchandise. A QPWP file can be used to inbound from a foreign country for merchandise moving via a mode of transport of ocean or rail. Goods coming into the United States via air will need to eventually use QXWX functionality that CBP is still working on. For outbound movements using QPWP, all modes of transportation apply. So the QPWP functionality can actually be used for any kind of 7512 inbound movement out, whether it's an IE, which is an immediate export, or a T&E, which is a transportation and exportation movement, as well as for zone-to-zone transfers between foreign trade zones.
Great. So you mentioned QXWX briefly a second ago. Could you give me more information about that, and what is the status of the program? I know it's come out and then been taken back, and so can you give us an update on that?
Absolutely. The QXWX is actually the electronic filing of in-bonds for companies moving their goods via air. So they're coming into the United States via air and move to another port or to an FTZ. Because air bill of ladings have not yet migrated over to the ACE platform within CBP systems, the QPWP application wouldn't work for those kind of shipments. Customs is currently working on is in the process of reevaluating the code they've written for this QXWX application, and will hopefully be picking up testing again in the next month or two. There's currently no date being provided by CBP that they would like to roll out this QXWX program to companies so that they can use it, but certainly as soon as they do, Integration Point, as soon as we learn here at Integration Point more, we'll be keeping people informed via our FTZ and GTM blogs.
Okay, good to know. And I'm going to come back to our blogs later, but let's keep going down here because you mentioned ACE, and I know that a lot has been coming out about ACE over the last few months. So how does what CBP is doing on September 29th this year affect QPWP filings for folks?
Well, on September 29th of this year, ACE e-manifest for rail and sea will be moving into ACE. So what does this mean? It means that all carriers will need to file their bills of ladings and manifest data into the ACE system and no longer into AMS. Your question about how it affects QPWP is actually a really great question, because a QPWP file posts against a bill of lading in CBP systems, so companies will have to file QPWP into ACE come September 29th. The ACS system will no longer be available. So software providers who are giving companies the ability to file QPWP filings should really have made this transition already. We here at Integration Point helped lead this transition into ACE back in February of this year, and are very aware of all of the testing requirements that were needed to make the transition. If there are any companies currently filing electronic QPWP and you're unsure of whether or not your provider has actually made the switch to ACE, you may want to call them today to ensure that they have, or they have a transition plan in place. CBP is very serious about this transition on September 29th, so you want to be prepared and not scrambling at the last minute.
Okay, good to know. So earlier you mentioned that QPWP doesn't eliminate the need for paper. So how would it actually impact my supply chain then if it isn't eliminating my need to create a paper customs form?
Great question, Anna. QPWP has the potential to streamline your supply chain by eliminating that waiting period that many companies experience, while CBP is working on actually signing the paper 7512 form and sending it back to them. Before the existence of QPWP, companies actually needed to make this 7512 form, fill it all out, and then mail it, fax it, or courier it over to the customs office so that CBP could actually sign the piece of paper. And then they'd have to wait for customs to then send it back to them before the goods could move. With the advent of QPWP, the authorization from CBP to allow this merchandise to move is now instantaneous. So companies will still need to print the form with the customs form 7512, but they should also now see a barcode on it that prints, and this shows that the merchandise that they're requesting to move inbound has been authorized for movement. The barcode also comes in handy for customs later when the goods arrive at the port, and it can just be scanned with the CBP scanner guns, and they can instantly see the status of the merchandise and help automate that arrival process at the same time.
So if my trucker opens a QPWP inbound movement to my FTZ, do they then have to close the inbound movement as well?
I get this question a lot, actually, because it's a really confusing process. Many people use the arrival and closure of inbound movements synonymously, and they're actually two very different things. If we look at a shipment moving inbound to the United States from a foreign location, there's really two steps in closing out an inbound movement. First, the inbound needs to be arrived, and the arrival is the responsibility of the carrier, and it can either be done electronically, so electronically arriving the inbound using the WP portion of the QPWP process, or the trucker can send the 7512 paperwork that was traveling with the merchandise to customs so that they can manually arrive the 7512 in their system. If the zone operator has an arrangement with the carrier to do so, they could also do the arrival once the inbound merchandise has arrived at their facility using their own WP functionality on the 214 concurrence. The second step in the process is the actual closing of the bill of lading associated with the inbound. To close a bill of lading, either an entry or an admission into a foreign trade zone needs to be done on that bill. If an admission is filed for merchandise moving into an FTZ, then a concurrence of that zone admission also needs to be done to complete that closing of the bill. The entry process, or the admission and concurrence process, will then release the manifest quantity in CBP systems, and will then and only then the inbound be closed, that inbound movement be closed. So really, to answer your question earlier, the person opening the QPWP inbound movement will not always be the person that will be closing the inbound. Have I lost you yet, Anna?
No, I think I get the inbound process for merchandise moving inbound to the United States, but is it a different process for products being exported?
Not really. There's still a two-step process. The inbound movement still needs to be arrived, but an export needs to be done to close the 7512. So the QPWP movement will need to be arrived either by CBP, the trucker, or the company exporting the goods, and then depending on the bill, what kind of bill of lading it is used for the QPWP movement, the carrier or the exporter will need to do the WP export filing.
Okay, so now I am confused. You said earlier that WP was the arrival of an inbound.
Well, actually, the WP part of the QPWP transaction can be used for many functions related to inbound movements. It can arrive the goods at a location. It can also indicate that the product has been exported from the United States. It can even be used to transfer the liability of merchandise from one party to another.
Interesting. So is it really complicated to get started? All these procedures and steps sound like there's a lot to do to process a QPWP file.
Oh, Anna, it's really easy. Both the process of filing a QPWP movement and actually getting started. Many companies are already doing exports and have all the information they need available to get started. Those companies that are already creating 7512s are actually doing more steps than they would if they transitioned over to QPWP filing. If a company is looking to get started with QPWP filing, they have to do a couple of things. First, they have to file a letter of intent with Customs to let them know that they're interested in starting this process. Once Customs approves the request, and the request will be then sent to their ABI rep who will get them set up in Customs online system so that these kind of files will be accepted in their system. And then you'll want to speak to your carriers. They'll need to speak to the carriers. First, to ensure that they are a bonded carrier so that they are allowed to move this type of merchandise. And if you intend to file the QPWP files on behalf of your carrier, then you'll need to have a power of attorney to do so. And possibly that carrier will have to update their profile in ACE so that they'll be displayed as a party that can obligate their bond. Finally, obviously, they'll need a way to connect to CBP systems and file these in-bond movements. Companies that are running foreign trade zones on software packages can leverage the package that they're already using to connect to Customs. Integration Point also offers a standalone package for companies that just need the ability to file QPWP directly with Customs into their ACE system as well.
Okay, great. So that's a lot of great information that you've given us, Liz, on QPWP today. I appreciate you spending time with us. I said we'd come back to our blogs. Can you give us the address for the blogs that we can get more information?
Absolutely. We have a fantastic blog out there for people to reference. You can find it at www.integrationpoint.com/foreign trade zone news.
Great. Well, Liz, we appreciate you talking with us today. I'm sure we'll be back in touch with you again soon, as this always seems to be changing and updating. So we look forward to hearing from you again soon.
All right, great. Thank you, Anna, for having me.